On my husband's funeral, my daughter-in-law leaned close and whispered, "Everything is already in my name." I didn't react. I didn't ask what she meant. But something inside me went very still. Because I knew that sentence didn't belong at a funeral. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and tell me where you're watching from." I want to know how far this story travels, because what I discovered after that whisper changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The church smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood. It was a scent I would come to associate with silence, the kind that presses against your ears until your thoughts echo too loudly. My husband, Robert, had been laid to rest just minutes before. 42 years of marriage, lowered into the ground in a quiet suburban cemetery outside Columbus, Ohio. The sky had been overcast all morning. No rain, just a heavy gray that seemed to sit low over everything, as if even the weather understood something had ended. I stood there longer than most people, long enough for the crowd to thin, long enough for the polite condolences to fade into distant murmurs, long enough to feel truly alone. My son, Daniel, had been standing to my right during the service. He barely spoke. When he did, it was to thank people who approached him, his voice measured, almost rehearsed. His wife, Claire, stayed close to him the entire time. Too close. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, fingers curled just enough to look supportive, but firm enough to feel like control. I noticed things like that now. Small things. The way she answered questions directed at him. The way she smiled before he did. The way his eyes drifted toward her before he said anything important. At the graveside, she hadn't cried. Not once. And I'm not saying everyone grieves the same way. I know that. But there's a difference between quiet grief and calculated stillness. Claire was still in a way that felt deliberate. When the final words were spoken and people began to leave, she stepped closer to me. That's when she leaned in. Her perfume was soft. Something floral. Expensive. And then she said it. "Everything is already in my name." Just like that. No explanation. No emotion. Just a statement. I turned my head slightly to look at her. She was smiling. Not warmly. Not kindly. Just smiling. As if she had just shared a harmless detail. As if we were discussing something trivial, like the weather or a dinner reservation. I searched her face for something. Anything. That would tell me I had misunderstood. But there was nothing. Only that same calm expression. Then she stepped back, adjusted her coat, and reached for Daniel's hand. "Are you ready?" she asked him softly. He nodded. Didn't look at me. Didn't ask if I needed anything. Didn't even notice the way I was still standing there, trying to understand what had just happened. We walked back to the cars in silence. The drive to the house took about 20 minutes. I sat in the back seat of their SUV, watching the familiar streets pass by. Grocery stores we used to visit together. The diner where Robert and I had breakfast every Sunday for years. The small park where Daniel learned to ride his bike. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It felt distant, like I was looking at someone else's life. Claire and Daniel spoke quietly in the front seats. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone. Low, controlled, comfortable, as if nothing had shifted. As if we hadn't just buried the man who held this family together for decades. When we arrived at the house, Claire was the first to step out. She unlocked the door before anyone else reached the porch. That caught my attention. Robert had always been the one to carry the house keys. After his heart attack, I hadn't even thought about where they went. Inside, the house felt exactly as I had left it that morning. The same framed photos on the walls. The same throw blanket draped over the arm of Robert's favorite chair. The same pair of reading glasses resting on the side table. Everything was still there, except him. I walked into the living room slowly. My shoes felt too loud against the hardwood floor. Claire moved past me and placed her purse neatly on the kitchen counter. Then she turned around and looked at the space, not like someone entering a home filled with memories, but like someone assessing property. "So," she said lightly, "we should probably start organizing things soon." I blinked. "Organizing?" I repeated. She nodded, already pulling out her phone. "There's a lot to go through. Paperwork. Accounts. The house, obviously. The house." She said it like it already belonged to her. I glanced at Daniel. He was standing near the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. "Daniel," I said quietly. He looked up, but only for a moment. Then his gaze shifted to her. Always to her. "Mom," he said, his voice careful. "Claire's just trying to help." Help. The word landed softly, but it didn't feel soft. It felt final. I nodded slowly. Of course. That's what this was. Help. I walked over to the armchair and sat down. Robert's chair. The cushions still held the shape of him. Or maybe I imagined that. Claire continued talking about schedules, about documents, about what needed to be handled. Her voice blended into the background. I wasn't really listening anymore. I was thinking about what she had said at the cemetery. Everything is already in my name. Already. That word stayed with me. Because already meant it hadn't just happened. It meant it had been done before today. Before the funeral. Before Robert was even buried. Maybe before he was even gone. I looked around the room again. At the photos. At the furniture. At the life Robert and I had built together over 4 decades. And for the first time since his death, I felt something different than grief. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something quieter. A question. What had she done while I wasn't looking? And why didn't my son seem surprised? That was the moment I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. I didn't understand what had happened to my husband's assets. I didn't understand what had been signed, transferred, or changed. And more importantly, I didn't understand my own place in this house anymore. But I was going to find out. Because grief may cloud your heart, but it sharpens your instincts. And mine were telling me that the funeral wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The morning after the funeral, the house felt unfamiliar. Not empty. Not yet. Just rearranged in a way I couldn't quite explain. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., the same time I had for years. Robert used to say I had an internal clock that never failed. Even on weekends, even on holidays. I was always up before the sun. Old habits don't disappear overnight. I walked into the kitchen and reached for the coffee maker without thinking. 2 mugs. I took out 2 mugs. Then I paused. Stood there for a moment, holding one in each hand, before slowly putting one back. The silence in the kitchen was different now. Not peaceful. Not comforting. Just still. I made my coffee and sat at the small breakfast table by the window. The one Robert insisted on buying 10 years ago because he liked the morning light. The sun came through exactly the same way. Soft. Golden. Familiar. But it didn't warm anything. I wrapped both hands around the mug and stared out at the backyard. The fence needed repainting. Robert had mentioned it a few weeks before he passed. I'll get to it in the spring, he had said. Spring had come. But he hadn't. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted the same. Strong. Slightly bitter. The way I always made it. I had never handled our finances. That wasn't unusual, not for our generation. Robert took care of everything. Mortgage, taxes, investments. He used to say it made things easier. One less thing for you to worry about, he'd tell me. And I believed him. I trusted him. Completely. Every bill was paid on time. Every account balanced. We never struggled, but we weren't extravagant either. We lived comfortably. Carefully. That's the word Robert liked. Carefully. After he retired from his construction business, things slowed down even more. Fewer expenses. More routine. We didn't need much. And I didn't ask questions. Maybe I should have. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. As I dried my hands, I noticed something small. The drawer beside the refrigerator, the one where Robert kept envelopes, receipts, small notes, was slightly open. Just an inch. I walked over and pulled it open the rest of the way. Inside, everything looked neat. Too neat. Stacks of papers arranged in clean lines. Folders I didn't recognize. I hesitated. Then I closed it again. Not yet. I wasn't ready to go through his things. Not like that. Later that morning, I heard voices downstairs. Claire's voice. Bright. Efficient. She had come back. Of course she had. I stayed upstairs for a while, listening. Cabinets opening. Drawers sliding. The quiet hum of someone moving through a space like they already belonged there. Eventually, I walked down. She was standing in the kitchen, holding a clipboard. A clipboard. Good morning, she said, like nothing had happened the day before. Like she hadn't whispered something that had kept me awake half the night. Morning, I replied. She glanced at her notes. I made a list, she said. Things we need to go through. Accounts, insurance policies, the house title, the house title. Again, she said it so easily, as if it was already settled. Daniel walked in a moment later, adjusting his shirt cuffs. He looked tired, but not grieving, just tired. Hey, Mom, he said. I nodded. He poured himself coffee. Didn't ask if I wanted more. Didn't ask how I slept. Just stood there, stirring sugar into his cup like it was any other morning. I watched them both. Claire talking, Daniel listening. And for a brief moment, I saw something I hadn't seen clearly before. They were comfortable. Too comfortable. In a house that had just lost its owner. In a situation that should have been uncertain. Unsettled. But they weren't unsettled. They were organized. Prepared. That word came back again. Already. Everything is already in my name. I felt it again. That quiet, cold shift inside me. Not grief. Something else. I looked at Daniel. My son, I thought. The boy who used to run into this kitchen every morning asking what was for breakfast. The boy who once cried because he thought he had lost his favorite toy when it had been in his pocket the whole time. He used to look at me for answers. Now he looked at her. For everything. I think I'm going to step out for a bit, I said. Claire looked up. Oh, where to? Her tone was light. Casual. But there was something underneath it. A question she wasn't asking directly. I picked up my purse from the chair. Just errands, I said. She nodded. Slowly. Well, let us know if you need anything. If I needed anything. I almost smiled. Daniel glanced at me. You want me to come with you? The question sounded automatic. Not genuine. No, I said gently. I'll be fine. I stepped outside into the cool morning air. Closed the door behind me. And for the first time since Robert's funeral, I felt something close to clarity. I didn't know exactly what had been done. I didn't know when it had been done. But I knew this. I was the only one in that house who didn't understand what had happened. And that was no longer acceptable. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, thinking. There was only one place to start. The bank. Because if everything was already in her name, then something had been moved, changed, signed, and I needed to see it for myself. I started the engine and drove away. The bank hadn't changed in 20 years. Same brick exterior, same narrow parking lot, even the same flag out front, slightly faded at the edges. I parked in the same spot Robert used to prefer, close to the entrance, but not too close. Easier to get out, he would say. I sat in the car for a moment before going in. Not because I was afraid, because I realized something simple and unsettling. I didn't know what I was walking in to ask. For over 4 decades, I had signed papers when Robert told me to sign. I had nodded when he explained things briefly. I had trusted that everything was handled. And now, standing at the edge of that system without him, I didn't even know where to begin. Still, I opened the door and stepped out. Inside, the air was cool and quiet. A few people sat in the waiting area. A young teller smiled politely as I approached. Good morning, she said. Good morning, I replied. I'd like to review my accounts. She nodded and asked for my ID. Simple. Routine. Normal. I handed it over and waited. A few minutes later, I was sitting across from a woman in a small office. Her name tag read Karen. She had the kind of voice people use when they're trying to be both professional and kind. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Carter, she said. I nodded. Thank you. She turned to her computer and began typing. So, you'd like a full review of your accounts? Yes, I said. All of them. She hesitated, just slightly, then nodded again. Of course. The room was quiet except for the soft clicking of keys. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. It didn't take long before something changed. Not in the room. In her expression. Her eyes narrowed just a little. Her posture shifted. Subtle, but enough. Is everything all right? I asked. She looked at me, then back at the screen. Yes, it's just, I want to make sure I'm pulling up the correct profile. That would be mine, I said calmly. She gave a small, polite smile. Yes, of course. More typing. More silence. Then she turned the monitor slightly toward herself, studying it more carefully. Mrs. Carter, she said slowly, when was the last time you personally reviewed your accounts? I thought about it. I don't recall, I admitted. My husband handled most of that. She nodded. I understand. There was a pause. Then she printed something. A single sheet. Placed it on the desk between us. This is your primary checking account, she said. I looked at the balance. It was lower than I expected. Not empty, but not what I thought it would be. This seems different, I said quietly. Karen folded her hands. There have been several transfers over the past 18 months. 18 months. That was before Robert passed. Long before. Transfers to where? I asked. She hesitated again, then turned another page toward me. An account under joint authorization, she said. Joint. My name. And another. I leaned forward slightly. Read it carefully. Claire Carter. My daughter-in-law. I didn't speak right away. Didn't react. I just looked at it. The letters didn't move. They didn't change. They just stayed there. How is that possible? I asked, my voice even. Karen chose her words carefully. It appears the account was updated to include an additional authorized user. By whom? She glanced at the screen again. It was processed with proper documentation. Documentation. That word again. What kind of documentation? I asked. Signed authorization forms. Signed. I sat back in my chair. By me? Karen nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. I almost smiled. Because I knew something she didn't. I didn't remember signing anything like that. Not recently. Not ever. And I would have remembered. Wouldn't I? When were these changes made? I asked. Karen checked the date. Approximately 14 months ago. 14 months. I repeated the number in my head. That was when Robert had his first serious health scare. The hospital visits. The paperwork. The long days where everything blurred together. Are there any other accounts? I asked. Karen hesitated, then nodded. Yes. She printed more pages. One after another. Savings. Investment accounts. Each one showing activity. Movement. Changes. And in more than one place. The same name appeared. Claire. Not as owner. Not fully. But present. Connected. Authorized. I felt it again. That quiet shift. That cold clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was a pattern. Careful. Gradual. Already. I placed my hands flat on the desk. Is there anything that requires my approval now? I asked. Karen looked at me, surprised by the question. Not at the moment, she said. But there are pending reviews on some accounts. Pending. I nodded. Good, I said. She blinked. I'd like copies of everything. I continued. All account activity for the past 2 years. Of course. She began organizing the documents. I watched her quietly, then asked one more question. Who initiated these changes? Karen paused, looked at the screen again, then back at me. It appears, she said carefully, that most of the updates were submitted in person by your husband. I held her gaze. And my daughter-in-law? Karen hesitated, then answered. She was present on several occasions. Of course she was. I gathered the papers slowly, neatly. Thank you, I said. As I stood to leave, Karen added softly. If you have any concerns, you may want to speak with a legal advisor. I nodded. I will. I walked out of the bank the same way I walked in. Calm. Steady. But the world outside felt different now. Sharper. Clearer. Because for the first time, I wasn't guessing anymore. Something had been done. And I had just started to see it. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I pulled into a small parking lot across the street from the bank. An old diner Robert and I used to visit years ago. The sign was still there. Slightly tilted now. Open 24 hours. We used to sit by the window, order the same breakfast, and talk about everything that mattered. Back when things were simple, I turned off the engine and sat there, the stack of papers resting on the passenger seat. I didn't touch them. Not yet. Because I already knew what they would show. Numbers. Dates. Signatures. All the things that make something look legitimate, even when it isn't. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for a moment. And that's when the memories started to come back. Not all at once. Just pieces. Small things I hadn't paid attention to before. Moments that didn't seem important at the time. But now they felt different. 14 months ago. That was the number. That was when the changes started. I remembered the hospital room. The machines. The quiet beeping that never really stopped. Robert lying there, pale but still trying to reassure me. It's nothing, he had said. Just stress. But it wasn't nothing. And we both knew it. Claire had been there that day, standing near the foot of the bed, not saying much, just watching. At the time, I thought she was being respectful, giving us space. Now, I wasn't so sure. I opened my eyes and stared at the windshield. Another memory surfaced. A week after Robert came home from the hospital, there had been papers. A lot of them. Insurance forms, medical documents, financial updates. He had asked me to sign a few things. Routine, he said. Just making sure everything is up to date. I didn't read them carefully. I trusted him. I always had. But Claire had been there too, sitting at the kitchen table, organizing the pages, handing them to me one by one, pointing to where I needed to sign. Right here, she had said. Her voice calm, helpful, efficient. I signed, without asking questions, without looking twice. I opened my eyes fully now. The image was clear, too clear. Another moment. A month later, Claire had offered to help with the bills. Just temporarily, she said. So you don't have to worry about anything while Robert recovers. I remember hesitating, just for a second. But Robert nodded. She's good with that kind of stuff, he said. So I agreed. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? She was family. She was my son's wife. I thought we were on the same side. I looked down at the papers beside me, then back up again. Another memory. This one smaller, but sharper. Claire standing in the kitchen one afternoon, talking on the phone. I wasn't meant to hear her. I had walked in quietly. Yes, everything is being transferred gradually, she said. Her voice low, controlled. I remember stopping in the hallway. Not moving, not breathing. But then she laughed. Light, casual, and said something about just organizing things. I had dismissed it. Told myself I misunderstood. Told myself I was being sensitive. That was the easiest explanation. It always is. I let out a slow breath. And then there was Daniel. My son. The pieces involving him were harder to look at. Because they didn't feel like deception. They felt like distance. He had changed. Gradually. Calls became shorter. Visits became less frequent. Conversations more superficial. He used to ask me things. My opinion. My advice. Then one day he stopped. And I didn't question it. I told myself he was busy. That work was demanding. That marriage changes things. All of it was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was, he had started trusting someone else more than me. And that someone else was sitting at our kitchen table, handing me papers to sign. I picked up the stack of documents from the seat. This time, I didn't hesitate. I flipped through the pages slowly. Carefully. Transfers. Authorizations. Account updates. Each one tied to a date. Each date pulling another memory to the surface. Hospital visits. Phone calls. Quiet afternoons. Moments where I had been present, but not paying attention. Because I believed everything was as it should be. Because I believed I was safe. Because I believed my family would never do anything that required me to question them. I stopped at one page. A signature. Mine. Clear. Recognizable. Undeniable. But I didn't remember signing this document. Not specifically. Not consciously. Just another form. Another routine update. I closed the folder. Placed it back on the seat. And stared straight ahead. For a long moment, I didn't feel anything. No anger. No panic. Just stillness. The kind that comes when everything finally makes sense. Because that's what this was. Not chaos. Not confusion. A sequence. Carefully arranged. Step by step. Signed. Transferred. Authorized. Already. I thought back to the funeral. To the whisper. Everything is already in my name. She hadn't been bragging. She had been stating a fact. And now, I was beginning to understand just how long that fact had been in the making. I reached for my keys. Started the engine again. This time, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. Because remembering is one thing. Understanding is another. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't go back home. Not yet. Instead, I drove across town. Past the grocery store where I used to shop every Friday. Past the pharmacy where Robert picked up his prescriptions. Past streets that felt familiar, but no longer comforting. I kept driving until I reached a place I hadn't been to in years. A small office building near downtown. 3 floors. Brown brick. Nothing special. But I knew someone there. Someone Robert trusted. I parked, turned off the engine, and looked up at the building. His accountant, Mr. Harris. Robert had worked with him for over 20 years. If anyone knew the full picture, it would be him. I stepped inside. The hallway smelled faintly of paper and old carpet. The kind of place where things don't change often. That felt right. At the end of the corridor, his name was still there. Harold Harris, Financial Services. I knocked once, then opened the door. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, observant. He stood up slowly when he saw me. Margaret, he said, surprised. I heard about Robert. I'm so sorry. I nodded. Thank you. There was a brief silence. Then he gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please sit. I sat. Placed the folder in front of me. Didn't open it yet. I need to understand something, I said. He didn't interrupt. Just listened. I went to the bank this morning. I continued. There have been changes. Transfers. Authorizations I don't remember approving. His expression didn't change much. But something in his posture did. A slight shift. Like he had been expecting this. I see, he said quietly. I opened the folder. Turned it toward him. These, I said. He leaned forward. Adjusted his glasses. And began reading. Slowly. Carefully. Page by page. The room was quiet except for the sound of paper moving. I watched him. Not the documents. Him. The way his brow tightened. The way he paused at certain lines. The way he exhaled, just slightly, when he reached the end. He closed the folder, folded his hands, and looked at me. How much do you already know? He asked. Not enough, I said. He nodded, then leaned back in his chair. Robert came to see me about a year and a half ago, he said. That number again. A year and a half. 14, 18 months. It all lined up. He was concerned, Mr. Harris continued. Not about his business. About his family. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Specifically, he said, choosing his words carefully, about Claire. I held his gaze. He thought she was too involved, he added. Too involved. That was one way to say it. He asked me to review certain account activities, Mr. Harris went on. At the time, everything appeared legal. Authorized. Properly documented. Because I signed them, I said. He nodded. Yes. There was no judgment in his voice. Just confirmation. He didn't think you understood what you were signing, he added. I looked down briefly. No, I said quietly. I didn't. Another pause. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since I left the bank. Did he try to stop it? Mr. Harris hesitated, then answered honestly. He tried to slow it down. Slow it down. Not stop it. That told me everything. There were limits to what he could do without causing conflict, he explained. And Robert wasn't someone who liked confrontation. That was true. He believed in handling things quietly, carefully, just like everything else in his life. But he didn't ignore it, Mr. Harris continued. He made some adjustments. Adjustments. I leaned forward slightly. What kind of adjustments? Mr. Harris stood up, walked to a filing cabinet behind his desk, unlocked it, pulled out a thin folder, and brought it back. He placed it in front of me. Didn't open it. Before you look at that, he said, you need to understand something. I waited. Not everything was transferred, he said. My fingers stilled on the edge of the folder. What do you mean? I mean, he said calmly. Robert anticipated this. The room felt quieter, smaller. He knew some control would be given away, Mr. Harris continued. But not all of it. I didn't move, didn't breathe. There are assets, he said, that were never connected to the accounts you just showed me. Assets. Separate. Protected. I looked at the folder in front of me, then back at him. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. Mr. Harris's expression softened. I think he hoped he wouldn't need to, he said. That sounded like Robert. Always hoping things would resolve on their own. Always believing people would do the right thing, eventually. And now? I asked. Mr. Harris met my eyes. Now, he said, it's up to you what you want to do with that information. I placed my hand on the folder, felt the weight of it. Not heavy, but significant, because whatever was inside was something Claire didn't know about, something she hadn't planned for, something that wasn't already in her name. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I asked one final question. Was Daniel aware of any of this? Mr. Harris paused, just long enough. I can't say for certain, he replied carefully. But he was present on more than one occasion. Present. That word again. I nodded slowly, closed my eyes for a brief second, then opened them again. Clear. Focused. Thank you, I said. I stood up, took the folder with me, and walked toward the door. Margaret, Mr. Harris called gently. I turned. Be careful, he said. I gave a small nod. I will. As I stepped back into the hallway, I felt it again. That shift. But this time, it wasn't uncertainty. It was direction. Because now, for the first time since the funeral, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. I didn't open the folder right away. Not in the hallway. Not in the car. I drove a few blocks before pulling over under a line of old oak trees. The shade covered the windshield, dimming the afternoon light just enough to make everything feel contained. Quiet. I turned off the engine, placed the folder on my lap, and sat there for a moment, looking at it. Not afraid, just aware. Because whatever was inside this folder was something Robert had chosen not to say out loud. Something he had prepared instead. I opened it carefully. Inside were only a few documents. Not many, but they were different from the ones at the bank. Cleaner, more deliberate. Each page looked like it had been reviewed more than once. The first document was a trust. I recognized Robert's name immediately, then mine. Below that, terms, conditions, language I didn't fully understand at first, but I read it slowly, line by line. And as I read, something shifted again. This wasn't a shared account. This wasn't something that could be casually accessed. This was structured, controlled, protected, a revocable living trust, with a clause that stood out more than anything else. Primary control remained with me, not transferred, not shared, mine. I read that line again, then again, as if it might disappear if I looked away. But it didn't. It stayed exactly where it was. Clear, unmistakable. I turned the page. There were assets listed, properties, investments, accounts I had never seen before. Or maybe I had, but never realized what they were. Robert had separated them, carefully, quietly. The next page explained something else. Access. In order to activate full control, I needed to formally acknowledge the trust. Through legal verification, through documentation, through intent. I leaned back slightly. Let the information settle. Claire had access to something. Yes, but not everything. Not even close. And more importantly, she didn't know what she didn't have. I closed the folder halfway, then opened it again, just to be sure. It was all still there. Every line, every clause, every decision Robert had made without telling me directly. Not because he didn't trust me, but because he was protecting something. Or someone. Me. I exhaled slowly, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something that wasn't confusion, not even suspicion. It was clarity. Cold. Precise. Useful. I looked out the windshield. The street was quiet. A few cars passing by. Nothing unusual. But everything felt different now. Because the balance had shifted. Claire believed she was in control. She believed everything had already been decided. Signed. Transferred. Finished. But she was only seeing part of the picture. The part she had helped create. Not the part Robert had hidden. I picked up my phone. Scrolled through my contacts. Stopped at one name. A lawyer Robert had mentioned once. Briefly. Years ago. At the time, it didn't seem important. Now it did. I didn't call right away. Instead, I saved the number somewhere easier to access. Then put the phone down. Because rushing wasn't necessary. Not anymore. I wasn't reacting. I was planning. I placed the folder back on the passenger seat. Neatly. Carefully. Then started the engine again. This time, I drove home. The house looked the same as always. Front lawn trimmed. Curtains drawn halfway. Nothing out of place. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something small. Claire's car. Parked slightly differently than usual. Closer to the front door. Like she expected to come and go frequently. Like she belonged there. I turned off the engine and stepped out. The air felt cooler now. Or maybe I just noticed it more. Inside, I could hear voices. Claire's. And Daniel's. Low. Controlled. I didn't rush in. I walked at the same pace I always did. Opened the door. Stepped inside. They both looked up. For a second, just a second, something flickered across Claire's face. Not fear. Not exactly. Something closer to awareness. As if she was trying to read me. To see if anything had changed. I gave her nothing. Just a small, polite nod. I stopped by the store, I said calmly. Not a lie. Not the full truth. Just enough. Oh, she replied, her tone light. Did you get everything you needed? Everything. I almost smiled. Yes, I said. I did. Daniel glanced between us. Then back down at his phone. The same distance. The same silence. But now, I understood it differently. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't coincidence. This was alignment. Between them. Not with me. And that was fine. Because for the first time, I didn't need them to be on my side. I walked past them into the living room. Set my purse down. Then sat in Robert's chair again. The same chair. The same position. But this time, I wasn't the same person sitting in it. Claire continued talking about something behind me. Schedules. Paperwork. Plans. I let her talk. Didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Because now I knew something she didn't. Something she couldn't see. Something she hadn't planned for. And that changed everything. I folded my hands in my lap. And listened. Not to her words. But to the silence between them. Because that's where the truth had always been. And now, I knew exactly what I was listening for. That evening, I didn't say much. Claire moved through the house like she always did. Efficient, organized, certain of where everything belonged. Daniel followed her rhythm. Quiet. Agreeable. Familiar. I stayed in the background. Not withdrawn. Just observant. Dinner was simple. Leftovers from the day before. Claire plated everything without asking. Set the table with the same careful precision she used for everything else. 3 plates. 3 glasses. 3 sets of silverware. Nothing missing. Nothing out of place. Except something was. The silence. Not the natural kind. Not the kind that comes from grief. This was controlled, measured, like everyone was speaking, just not out loud. Halfway through the meal, Claire looked at me. We should probably schedule a meeting, she said, to go over everything properly. Everything. The word again. What kind of meeting? I asked. Her smile was small, polite, with a legal advisor, just to make sure everything transitions smoothly. Transitions? I nodded. That sounds reasonable, I said. Daniel glanced up briefly, then back down at his plate. No reaction, no questions, as if this had already been discussed. Decided. I took a sip of water, set the glass down. I have a few things to review first, I added calmly. Claire's eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. Then she nodded. Of course. Of course. That was her favorite phrase. Agreeable, neutral, safe, but never empty. There was always something behind it. After dinner, I went upstairs, closed the door to the bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt focused. I reached for my phone, scrolled again, and this time, I made the call. It rang twice before a voice answered. Law offices of Bennett and Cole. My name is Margaret Carter, I said. I'd like to speak with someone regarding a trust. There was a brief pause, then a transfer. A different voice came on the line. Calm, professional. Mr. Cole speaking. I explained only what was necessary. Not everything. Just enough. My husband recently passed, I said. I've come across a trust document. I need to understand my position. He listened, didn't interrupt, then said, Can you bring the documents in tomorrow? Yes, I replied. Morning or afternoon? Morning. 10 o'clock. That works. We ended the call. Simple. Direct. No unnecessary words. I placed the phone down and sat there for a moment. Then stood up, walked to the closet, opened the door. Robert's clothes were still there. Shirts pressed, shoes lined up, everything exactly as he left it. I reached out and touched one of his jackets. Just briefly, then let it go. Because this wasn't about holding on anymore. It was about understanding what he had done before he left. The next morning, I left the house early. Before Claire. Before Daniel. The air was colder than the day before. Sharp. Clear. I arrived at the law office 10 minutes early. Sat in the waiting room. Folder in my lap. Hands steady. When Mr. Cole came out, he greeted me with a firm handshake. Mrs. Carter, he said. Please, come in. His office was quiet. Minimal. Everything in its place. I handed him the folder. He opened it immediately. No hesitation. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. Then slowed. Then stopped. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me. Who else knows about this? He asked. No one, I said. He nodded. That's good. Good. The word landed differently. Why? I asked. He closed the folder gently. Because this, he said, tapping the document lightly, changes the situation entirely. I didn't speak. I waited. This trust, he continued, was designed to protect the primary beneficiary. That's me, I said. Yes, he confirmed. And the assets listed here, he added, are not accessible without your direct authorization. I held his gaze. And if someone tried to access them? They couldn't, he said simply. Not complicated. Not uncertain. Just couldn't. I nodded slowly. What about the other accounts? I asked. The ones already transferred. He considered that. Those may require a different approach, he said. But this, he tapped the folder again, gives you leverage. Leverage. Another word that felt precise. Controlled. What would you advise? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question. Do they know you've seen this? No, I said. He nodded. Then don't tell them. Simple. Clear. Not yet, he added. I understood. Because once something is revealed, it can't be undone. They believe they're in control, he continued. Yes, I said. Good, he replied. Good. Again. This time, I understood why. Let them continue believing that, he said. I nodded. Because now, for the first time, I could see the full picture. Not just what had been taken, but what had been protected. And more importantly, what could still be reclaimed. I stood up, took the folder. Thank you, I said. As I walked out of the office, I felt something settle into place. Not anger, not relief. Something quieter, stronger. Because now, I wasn't just aware of the truth. I knew how to use it. I didn't go home right away. Not after the meeting. Instead, I drove slowly through streets I had known for decades and saw them differently. Everything felt sharper now, more defined, like the edges of things had been blurred before and were only now coming into focus. I stopped at a small coffee shop near the courthouse, one Robert and I had never visited. That felt intentional, a place without memories, without history, just a table, a chair, a moment to think. I ordered coffee, black, sat by the window, and took out the folder again, not to read it. I already knew what it said, but to feel it, the weight of it, because this wasn't just paper. It was position, control, time. I placed it flat on the table, and for the first time, I started to think not about what had happened, but about what would happen next. Mr. Cole's words stayed with me. Don't tell them. Not yet. That meant one thing. They were still moving forward, believing they had already won. Claire, Daniel, their confidence, their calm. It wasn't natural. It was built on something they thought was secure, which meant, if I moved too soon, I would only warn them. I took a slow sip of coffee, let the bitterness settle. Then I reached for my phone, opened my notes, and began writing. Not emotions, not questions, steps. Simple, clear. First, do nothing. At least, nothing visible. Go home. Listen. Watch. Let them speak freely. Because people reveal more when they feel safe. Second, secure what was already mine. Meet with Mr. Cole again. Start the process quietly. Verification. Activation. Documentation. No noise. No confrontation. Just movement. Third, track what had been taken. Every transfer. Every signature. Every account. Not to react. To understand. Because once I understood the full structure, I would know exactly where it could break. I paused. Looked at what I had written. It wasn't complicated. That was the part that surprised me. For something that felt so overwhelming just a day ago, the path forward was simple. Not easy, but simple. I closed my phone, finished my coffee, then gathered the folder, and left. When I arrived home, Claire was in the living room. Laptop open, papers spread across the table. Daniel sat nearby, scrolling through something on his phone. They both looked up as I walked in. Again, that moment. That pause. That subtle scan. Looking for change. I gave them none. How was your morning? Claire asked. Her tone was light. Curious. Careful. Productive, I said. And that was the truth. She nodded. Good. I was actually reviewing some things as well. Of course she was. I stepped further into the room. Set my purse down. What kind of things? I asked. Casual. Neutral. She turned her laptop slightly. Just organizing accounts, she said. Making sure everything is streamlined moving forward. Streamlined. Another word. Another layer. I nodded. That's helpful, I said. She smiled. Satisfied. Because she thought we were aligned. That we were working toward the same goal. We weren't. But she didn't know that. And that was important. Daniel stood up. I'm heading out for a bit, he said. He looked at Claire. Not me. Text me if you need anything. She nodded. I will. He walked past me, gave a small, almost automatic smile, then left. The door closed behind him, and the house shifted, just slightly. Claire turned back to her laptop, typing, focused, comfortable. I watched her for a moment, then walked into the kitchen, opened a drawer, the same drawer I had noticed the day before. This time, I pulled it open fully. No hesitation. Inside, the folders were still there, neatly arranged, labeled, organized. Her system. I reached in and picked one up. Didn't open it. Just held it. Because I didn't need to see what was inside yet. I already knew enough. Behind me, Claire's voice carried lightly. Looking for something? I turned, met her eyes, held them for just a second longer than usual, then gave a small shake of my head. No, I said calmly. Just getting familiar. Familiar. She smiled again. But this time, there was something else behind it. A flicker. Small. Quick. But real. Because for the first time, she wasn't entirely sure what I knew. I placed the folder back, closed the drawer, and walked past her again. Same pace. Same calm. Same silence. But everything had changed. Because now, I wasn't trying to understand the situation anymore. I was inside it. And I was moving. Quietly. Carefully. Exactly the way Robert always had. And that was something Claire had never planned for. The next 2 days passed quietly. Too quietly. Claire continued her routine. Laptop open every morning. Phone calls in the afternoon. Short conversations with Daniel in low voices. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But everything consistent. And that told me something. They were moving forward. following a plan. A plan they believed was already complete. I didn't interrupt it. I didn't question it. I let it happen. Because that was part of my plan too. On the third morning, I left the house early again. Same time. Same calm. But this time, I wasn't going to observe. I was going to act. Not loudly. Not visibly. Just precisely. At Mr. Cole's office, everything moved quickly. Documents reviewed. Forms prepared. Signatures required. Not many, but each one mattered. Once this is filed, he said, sliding a paper toward me, control is formally re-established. Re-established. I read the line again, then signed. My hand didn't shake. Not even slightly. Because now, I knew exactly what I was signing. Every word. Every clause. Every consequence. When I finished, he nodded. It will take a few days to process, he said. But from this point forward, no further changes can be made without your authorization. No further changes. That was enough. I left his office the same way I had entered. Quiet. Unnoticed. But something had already shifted. Not in the house. Not yet. In the system. In the structure behind everything. The part Claire couldn't see. That afternoon, I went to the bank again. Karen recognized me immediately. Mrs. Carter, she said, surprised. Back so soon. I gave a small nod. I need to place a review hold on several accounts, I said. Her expression changed. Professional. Focused. Of course. Which ones? I handed her a list. Prepared. Clear. She read through it. Then looked up. These accounts are currently active under joint authorization, she said carefully. I understand, I replied. But you're requesting to restrict access? Yes. She hesitated. Just slightly. Then nodded. All right. I'll initiate the process. Some transactions may be temporarily delayed. Delayed. That word mattered. Because delay creates confusion. And confusion reveals behavior. That's fine, I said. She typed for a few moments. Then printed confirmation. Everything is in review status, she said. If anyone attempts to move funds, it will require additional verification. Additional verification. I nodded. Thank you. When I left the bank, I didn't feel different. No satisfaction. No relief. Just alignment. Because now, the next part wasn't up to me. It was up to them. I drove home. Same. Streets. Same turns. Same driveway. Nothing had changed on the outside. But inside, I could feel it before I even opened the door. A shift. Subtle. But real. Claire was in the living room again. Laptop open. Phone in hand. But this time, her posture was different. Less relaxed. More alert. She looked up the moment I stepped in. Too quickly. Hey, she said. Her tone was normal. But her eyes weren't. They were searching. Measuring. Hi, I replied calmly. I set my purse down. Moved the same way I always did. No rush. No tension. Behind her, I could hear Daniel's voice coming from the hallway. Low. Tight. That doesn't make sense, he was saying. Claire stood up. Walked a few steps toward me. Then stopped. As if deciding something. Did you go out again this morning? She asked. Casual. But not really. Yes, I said. Just errands. Errands. The same word. The same tone. But this time, it landed differently. She nodded slowly. Then glanced toward the hallway, where Daniel's voice had stopped. Silence followed. Heavy. Uncertain. I walked past her into the kitchen. Opened the cabinet. Took out a glass. Filled it with water. Simple. Normal. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Claire. She didn't speak right away. Just stood there. Waiting. For something. Anything. I turned. Met her eyes. Held them. Not long. Just enough. Is everything all right? I asked. Her smile came back. Quick. Practiced. Of course, she said. But there was a pause before the words. Small. But real. Because something wasn't aligning anymore. Not for her. Not the way it had before. From the hallway, Daniel appeared. Phone still in his hand. His expression tighter than usual. He looked at Claire. Then at me. Then back at Claire. Can we talk? He said quietly. Not to me. To her. She nodded. Excuse us, she said. Polite. Controlled. They walked into the other room. The door didn't close all the way. Just enough. Their voices dropped. But not completely. It's not going through. That's not possible. It worked before. I didn't move. Didn't listen too closely. I didn't need to. Because I already knew what they were trying to do. And I already knew why it wasn't working. I took a sip of water. Set the glass down. And stood there in the quiet kitchen. While just a few steps away, their certainty began to crack. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. And that was all I needed. The tension didn't disappear. It stayed in the house. Moved through the rooms. Sat at the table with us. Followed us into silence. That evening, Claire suggested we all sit down. Just to talk, she said. Her tone was careful. Too careful. Daniel agreed immediately. Of course he did. We gathered in the living room. Same place. Same arrangement. But nothing felt the same anymore. Claire sat across from me. Back straight. Hands folded neatly in her lap. Daniel took the chair beside her. Not beside me. That detail didn't surprise me anymore. It just confirmed things. Claire smiled. A practiced smile. I think it's important we stay transparent with each other, she began. Transparent. I nodded. I agree. She seemed relieved by that. Just slightly. As you know, she continued, there have been a few complications with some accounts. Complications. That was one way to describe it. Daniel shifted in his seat. Avoided looking at me. Claire continued. Nothing serious, of course. Just temporary delays. The bank sometimes flags things after a major life event. She said it smoothly, like she had rehearsed it, like it was meant to sound normal. Expected. I let her finish. Didn't interrupt. Then I asked a simple question. What kind of transactions were delayed? Her smile tightened. Just a fraction. Routine ones, she said. Transfers. Adjustments. Things we've already discussed. Another word. I tilted my head slightly. I don't recall discussing any transfers, I said calmly. The room went still. Not silent. Still. Claire held my gaze. Longer this time. Measuring. Recalculating. Daniel looked up. Finally. Mom, he said, his voice low. Claire's just trying to manage things. Make it easier for everyone. Easier. I nodded. I understand, I said. Then I reached for my purse. Opened it. And took out a thin stack of papers. Not the trust. Not everything. Just enough. I placed them on the table between us. Neatly. Carefully. Claire's eyes dropped to them immediately. Daniel. Followed. What is this? He asked. Account records, I said. Claire didn't touch them. Not yet. But I saw it. That flicker again. Stronger this time. From the bank, I added. Her posture shifted. Just slightly. They show transfers, I continued. Authorizations. Dates. I paused. Let the words settle. Then added, signatures. Daniel looked confused. Claire didn't. She knew exactly what I was referring to. I don't see what the issue is, she said. Her voice was steady, but thinner now. Everything was done properly. Properly. I nodded. Yes, I said. That's what the bank confirmed. A brief silence. Then I leaned back in my chair. Still calm. Still measured. But I don't remember authorizing any of it, I said. Daniel frowned. Mom, you probably just don't remember. I remember more than you think, I said quietly. He stopped. Claire didn't speak. Didn't move. So I continued. 14 months ago, I said. Hospital visits. Paperwork. Forms I was asked to sign. I looked at her. Directly. You handed them to me. The room tightened. Claire finally reached for the papers. Picked them up. Flipped through them quickly. Too quickly. As if speed could change what was written. It was all explained at the time, she said. That's not what I'm questioning, I replied. My voice didn't rise. Didn't change. I'm questioning why so much needed to be transferred in the first place. She met my eyes again. This time, there was no smile. Because it was necessary, she said. For what? She hesitated. Just for a second. For efficiency, she answered. Efficiency. I let the word hang there. Then nodded slowly. I see. Another pause. Then Daniel spoke again. Mom, no one's trying to do anything wrong here, he said. We're just trying to manage things the right way. The right way? I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as a child. Not as my son. As someone sitting across from me. Choosing a side. I believe you, I said. And I meant it. In his own way, he probably did believe that. Claire, however, she was watching me closely now, trying to understand how much I knew, how far I had gone. So I gave her just enough. No further transactions will go through without my approval, I said. Clear. Simple. Final. Daniel blinked. What do you mean? Claire didn't ask. She already understood. The accounts are under review, I said. I've requested additional verification for any changes. Silence. Heavy this time. Daniel looked between us. Confused. Claire didn't look away. Her expression didn't break. But something behind it did. A crack. Small. But visible. That's unnecessary, she said carefully. No, I replied. It's appropriate. We held each other's gaze. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Until finally, she nodded. Once. Slowly. Of course, she said. But this time, the words didn't carry the same confidence. Because now, she knew. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to understand that the situation had changed. And as I sat there, calm, still, watching it unfold, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of the conversation. It was the beginning of the truth coming out. And this time, I was the one controlling when it did. After that conversation, nothing was said directly, but everything was understood. The house grew quieter. Not peaceful. Careful. Claire spoke less. When she did, her tone was softer. Measured. As if every word needed to be placed correctly. Daniel stayed out more. Came home later. Left earlier. And when he was there, he watched. Not me. Her. Looking for cues. For reassurance. For direction. I didn't give either of them anything. No accusations. No questions. No emotion. Just normal. Days passed. Small changes began to surface. Subtle at first. Claire stopped making phone calls in the living room. Took them upstairs instead. Closed doors. Lowered voice. Daniel checked his phone more often. Frowned more. Spoke less. They were adjusting. Reacting. Trying to understand what had shifted without knowing exactly what it was. And I let them. Because uncertainty does more than confrontation ever could. On the fourth day, I received a call. Mr. Cole. It's done, he said. That was all. No explanation needed. No details required. I understood. Control had been reestablished. Fully. Formally. Irrevocably. I thanked him. Hung up. And sat there for a moment. Not thinking. Not planning. Just letting it settle. Because this was the point Robert had prepared for. The moment he never said out loud, but made sure would exist. I stood up. Walked into the living room. Claire was there. Of course she was. Laptop open. Papers arranged. The same system. The same order. But not the same confidence. Daniel was sitting beside her. Leaning forward. Listening. To her. They both looked up as I entered. That pause again. Longer this time. Heavier. I think it's time we talk, I said. Simple. Direct. Claire closed her laptop slowly. Folded her hands. I agree, she said. Daniel didn't speak. We sat. Same positions. Same room. But this time, there was no illusion left. I reached into my bag and took out the folder. The one they hadn't seen. The one she didn't know existed. I placed it on the table. Between us. Claire's eyes dropped to it immediately. Not curious. Not confused. Alert. What is that? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I opened the folder. Turned it toward them. And let them see. Not everything. Just enough. Pages. Names. Structures. Terms. Daniel leaned forward. His expression shifting from confusion to recognition. Claire didn't move. Didn't speak. But I saw it. That moment. When someone realizes they don't have the full picture. This, I said calmly, is what Robert set up before he passed. Silence. No denial. No interruption. Just silence. He was aware of the changes being made. I continued. Claire's eyes flickered. Just once. He didn't stop them, I added. Because that mattered. He adjusted. I let that word sit between us. Daniel looked at me. Adjusted how, he asked. I met his eyes. By protecting what couldn't be transferred. Claire spoke then. Finally. That's not. It's legal, I said quietly. She stopped. Because she knew. Because she had already seen enough to understand what she was looking at. Primary control remains with me. I continued. Nothing in this structure moves without my authorization. Daniel leaned back slowly. Processing. Claire's posture changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The confidence was gone. Not replaced with fear. With calculation. Fast. Focused. How long have you known about this? She asked. Her voice was steady, but thinner now. Long enough, I said. That was all she needed. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. It does, I said calmly. You just didn't have all the information. Claire didn't argue. Didn't push. Because she understood something now. Something important. The position she thought was secure. Wasn't. Not completely. Not anymore. I closed the folder. Slowly. Deliberately. And placed it back in my bag. This isn't about punishment, I said. Neither of them spoke. It's about control, I continued. Clarity. Boundaries. Each word landed. Clean. Final. Claire held my gaze. Longer than before. Then she nodded. Once. Small. But real. Daniel looked between us, still trying to understand where he stood. But that wasn't my concern anymore. Because this wasn't about where they stood. It was about where I did. And for the first time since Robert passed, that position was clear. Not fragile. Not uncertain. Defined. They thought everything had already been decided. Signed. Secured. But they were wrong. Because the most important decision had never been theirs to make. After that day, the house changed. Not in the way people expect. No arguments. No raised voices. No dramatic exits. Just distance. Clear. Quiet. Permanent. Claire stopped moving through the house like she owned it. She still organized things. Still kept her lists. Still spoke about efficiency. But something in her tone had shifted. Less certain. More careful. Daniel changed too. Not all at once. Not in a way that could be pointed out in a single moment. But gradually, he started looking at me again. Not past me. Not through me. At me. Like he was trying to remember something. Or understand something he hadn't questioned before. We didn't talk about it. Not directly. Because some things don't need to be explained. They just settle. A few days later, I met with Mr. Cole again. Final documents. Final confirmations. Everything was completed. Every structure Robert had put in place was now active, secure, untouchable. What would you like to do moving forward? He asked. A simple question, but it carried weight. Because, for the first time, the decision was entirely mine. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about the house, the years inside it, the mornings, the routines, the life Robert and I had built piece by piece, carefully. And I realized something. That life didn't exist anymore. Not in the same way. Not in that space. Sell the property, I said calmly. Mr. Cole nodded. No surprise. No hesitation. I'll begin the process, he replied. And just like that, it was decided. When I returned home that afternoon, Claire was in the kitchen. Of course she was. That had become her place. Her center. She looked up as I walked in. There was no tension in her expression this time. No calculation. Just awareness. I spoke with a realtor, I said. Her hand stilled on the counter. About the house. Silence. Not heavy. Just present. Daniel appeared in the doorway. Looked between us. You're selling it? He asked. Yes, I said. Simple. Final. Claire didn't argue. Didn't question. Because she understood. This wasn't something she could influence anymore. When? Daniel asked. Soon. I replied. He nodded slowly. Processing. Accepting. Claire turned slightly, leaning against the counter. What about you? She asked. A fair question. For the first time, a genuine one. I'll be fine, I said. And I meant it. Because I wasn't losing anything. I was leaving something behind. There's a difference. The next few weeks moved quietly. The house was listed, viewed, discussed, then sold. Faster than I expected. But that felt right. Because I wasn't holding on to it. I wasn't trying to preserve something that no longer existed. On my last day there, I woke up early. The same time. 5:30 a.m. Old habits. I walked through each room slowly. Not looking for anything. Just seeing it. One last time. The living room. The kitchen. The hallway. Each space held something. A memory. A moment. A version of my life that had been real and complete. I paused at Robert's chair. Ran my hand along the back of it. Then stepped away. Because I didn't need to take anything with me. Not physically. Everything that mattered. I already had. Claire and Daniel were waiting by the door when I came downstairs. My bags were packed. Simple. Light. Daniel looked at me. Really looked. I didn't know, he said quietly. I nodded. I know, I replied. Because I did. His silence. His distance. His choices. They weren't all intentional. Some of them were just easier. Claire didn't speak right away. Then finally, I did what I thought was right, she said. Her voice wasn't defensive. Just honest. In her own way. I know, I said. And I meant that too. Because this wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about consequence. And clarity. I picked up my bag. Walked to the door. Then paused. Just for a moment. Not to hesitate. Just to finish something. I hope you both find what you're looking for, I said. No anger. No bitterness. Just truth. Then I opened the door. And stepped outside. The air was cool. Clean. Different. I placed my bag in the car. Got in. And sat there for a second. Looking at the house. Not with regret. Not with sadness. Just recognition. Because it had been mine. It had been ours. And now, it wasn't. And that was all right. I started the engine. Pulled out of the driveway. And and didn't look back. Because some chapters don't need to be revisited. They just need to be understood and left behind. A week later, I moved into a smaller place. Quiet. Simple. Mine. No shared accounts. No hidden signatures. No assumptions. Just clarity. Sometimes, in the morning, I still wake up at 5:30. I make my coffee, sit by the window, and watch the light come in. The same way it always has. Soft. Steady. Unchanged. But I'm different now. Not because of what was taken, but because of what I finally saw, and what I chose to do with it. Claire thought everything was already in her name. And for a while, she was right. But what she didn't understand was this. Ownership isn't just about documents, or signatures, or control. It's about awareness. And the moment I understood everything, that's the moment everything changed. Because in the end, they did